In the town of Greenhill, summer evenings had a quiet kind of charm. Nestled against a stretch of hills and cloaked by lush trees, the town radiated a serene simplicity. Here, time seemed slower, caught somewhere between the pull of the past and the drift of the present. Its streets wound gently, dotted with charming homes and white picket fences that wrapped around yards like protective arms. People in Greenhill knew each other by name, their lives woven together through years of shared stories, seasonal gatherings, and idle chatter over coffee cups. Amid the stillness of one mild summer evening, however, a call shattered the calm. The town's perfect facade cracked when Peter Whitman, a well-regarded architect, dialed 911 with an urgency that echoed through the quiet neighborhood. Inside the kitchen of his picture-perfect home, Carol Whitman, his wife, lay motionless on the floor. The news rippled through Greenhill like a thunderclap, sparking the beginning of a mystery that would unravel a tapestry of secrets beneath the Whitmans' lives. The Whitmans were the epitome of what Greenhill revered as success and stability. Carol, a second-grade teacher, was the kind of woman who wore kindness like a second skin. With her warm smile and gentle voice, she had a way of calming her students with a simple look, her deep empathy reaching even the most difficult children. Parents trusted her, fellow teachers admired her, and friends cherished her. Carol represented all that was good and pure in a community proud of its integrity. Peter Whitman, her husband, had spent years building a name for himself as a talented architect. He had a particular gift for designing homes that held both charm and comfort. His clients were often drawn to his artistic eye, his vision for creating warm, family-centered spaces. To all who knew him, Peter was not just an architect, he was a man who crafted dreams into tangible, lasting structures. With his solid, dependable demeanor, he was a fixture in the town, respected and admired. Together, Carol and Peter were seen as an ideal couple. Married for nearly 15 years, they were a team, inseparable in the eyes of their friends and family. Their 2 young children completed the picturesque image, a happy, stable family, well-known and well-loved by everyone in Greenhill. Their charming house stood on the edge of town, with a white fence and a garden where Carol would often spend her afternoons. Yet, as the townsfolk would soon learn, the Whitman family's perfect image was no more than a mask, hiding shadows lurking just beneath the surface. In the beginning, the signs were subtle, so subtle that Carol barely noticed them herself. Peter, who once took pride in finishing work early to be home for family dinners, began coming home late. His absences were explained away as the pressures of his career. "This project is taking more time than expected," he would say. Or, "The clients are really particular this time." Carol listened, nodding along, her mind filled with worries. She told herself that every marriage had its challenges, and that Peter's stress was temporary. But over the months, her instinct told her that something was amiss. He grew colder, more detached, his eyes carrying an unfamiliar shadow. He no longer laughed at her jokes or asked about her day. Conversations that once flowed effortlessly between them now felt forced, as though they were 2 strangers pretending to understand each other. Carol confided in her best friend, Emily, during a Saturday morning coffee date. She tried to keep her voice steady, her words casual. "Peter seems different lately," she began, stirring her coffee to avoid meeting Emily's gaze. "It's like he's drifting further and further away. He doesn't look at me the same way anymore." Emily, with a concerned frown, urged Carol to address the issue with Peter directly. But Carol wasn't ready. She was afraid that confronting him would shatter the delicate threads holding her life together. Instead, she assured herself that it was just a phase, something that would pass with time. "He's just under a lot of pressure," she told herself, though deep down, she knew this was a hollow hope. As Carol clung to the hope of things returning to normal, Peter found solace elsewhere. At his architectural firm, he had grown close to Allison Grant, a newly hired interior designer. Allison was beautiful, captivating, with a vibrant energy that seemed to electrify the air around her. She was the kind of woman who could command attention without trying, her charisma a striking contrast to Carol's quiet grace. Where Carol was patient and composed, Allison was vivacious and magnetic. There was a spark in her that reminded Peter of a version of himself he had forgotten. To Allison, Peter was more than just her boss, he was a man with ambition, talent, and charisma. She admired him in a way Carol no longer did. And for Peter, The thrill of Allison's attention felt like a new beginning. Their conversations began innocently enough. They would share coffee breaks, laughing over shared jokes, confiding in each other about work frustrations. But soon, their interactions turned into something more. There were lingering glances, touches that seemed accidental but were anything but. Peter felt alive in a way he hadn't in years, captivated by Allison's charm. She made him feel desirable, reminding him of the man he thought he could still be. Allison, however, was not just infatuated with Peter. She saw in him a way out of her own life, a path toward a future of security and luxury. The thought of being tied to Peter thrilled her, and she didn't care that he was married. Carol was simply a shadow, a fixture in the background that she believed Peter would eventually shed. As their affair grew more intense, Peter's nights at the office grew longer. Carol, sensing the growing distance, couldn't bear the thought of accusing him outright. Instead, she swallowed her pain, telling herself that it would pass, that Peter would return to her and the life they had built together. But Peter was no longer interested in saving his marriage. The idea of being with Allison, of leaving behind the responsibilities of family life, became an obsession. He began to fantasize about a life free from his marriage, from the confines of Green Hill's expectations. Yet he knew that divorce would be messy, drawn out, and damaging to his reputation. The very thought of going through such a public process filled him with dread. Allison's words, spoken one night during a stolen moment, began to echo in his mind. Imagine a life where it's just us, Peter. No strings, no obligations. The thought lingered, growing louder each day. Soon, Peter found himself researching ways to make Carol disappear, not in a violent, overt way, but in a manner that would allow him to walk away without blame or suspicion. One night, alone in his office, he found an article about poisons and toxins. His search led him to digitalis, a plant-derived substance that could cause symptoms similar to heart failure if administered in small doses over time. The effects would be subtle at first: dizziness, fatigue, palpitations, but if enough built up in the bloodstream, it would ultimately lead to death, appearing to be natural causes. Peter was intrigued. He read about how digitalis could be easily obtained in concentrated form and considered the plausibility of using it without raising suspicion. He convinced himself that it would be the cleanest way, that it would allow him to emerge unscathed. The plan formed with chilling clarity. He began to visualize it, each step carefully orchestrated, each detail meticulously planned. Peter began the process slowly, slipping tiny amounts of digitalis into Carol's morning coffee. At first, the dosage was so small that it barely affected her. But over time, he increased the amount, his confidence growing as he saw his plan taking effect. The symptoms crept in gradually, so subtly that Carol barely noticed at first. Soon, however, her health began to decline noticeably. She felt constantly fatigued, struggling to find the energy for even the simplest tasks. Dizzy spells became frequent, and she occasionally experienced heart palpitations that left her breathless. Concerned, she went to her doctor, who ran a series of tests. But the results came back normal, and the doctor attributed her symptoms to stress or possibly anemia. Peter played the role of the caring husband flawlessly. He fetched her tea, encouraged her to rest, and held her hand during moments of weakness. His voice was gentle, reassuring, always there with a sympathetic word. "You're just tired, Carol. Everything will be all right," he'd say, masking his cold indifference with a veneer of love and concern. But his mind was far from calm. Inside, he felt a mixture of excitement and fear, each day bringing him closer to his goal. His affair with Allison continued in secret, their stolen moments fueled by the thrill of deception. The excitement of the affair was intensified by the knowledge that soon he would be free, that he and Allison would no longer need to hide. As summer drew on, Carol's health deteriorated further. On a humid July evening, she felt a wave of dizziness while preparing dinner. She clutched the countertop, struggling to stay upright as the world spun around her. Her vision blurred, and the last thing she remembered was the cold tile floor pressing against her cheek as she fell. Peter found her moments later, lying motionless on the floor, her skin pale and clammy. He stood over her for a heartbeat, his heart racing, before dialing 911 with the urgency he knew was expected of him. His shouts for help echoed through the neighborhood, reaching the ears of concerned neighbors who watched as paramedics arrived and took Carol to the hospital. Despite their efforts, Carol was pronounced dead within the hour. The initial cause of death was listed as heart failure, a natural yet tragic passing that devastated her friends and family. The town of Green Hill mourned the loss of one of its brightest souls, a woman whose kindness had touched so many lives. But for Detective Sarah Monroe, the lead investigator assigned to the case, something didn't feel right. Monroe was known for her sharp instincts, a keen eye for inconsistencies that others overlooked. She couldn't shake the feeling that Peter's reaction during questioning was off. His sorrow seemed rehearsed, too carefully measured, his grief a mask rather than an emotion. Determined to dig deeper, Monroe ordered a toxicology report on Carol's blood. When the results came back, they revealed traces of digitalis at levels far too high to be accidental. Digitalis wasn't a substance that could be encountered casually, it had to be administered intentionally. The realization hit her with a shock. This was no natural death. Carol had been poisoned. With mounting suspicion, Monroe returned to Peter's office with the toxicology report in hand, her questions now sharp, relentless. At first, Peter played the role of the grieving husband, denying any knowledge of the toxin. But Monroe's probing gaze began to chip away at his calm. She outlined the evidence methodically, her voice unyielding. You were the only one who prepared her meals, her coffee, everything she pressed. No one else had access to her food or drink. Peter's facade crumbled under Monroe's relentless questioning. In a desperate attempt to save himself, he tried to shift the blame onto Allison, claiming she had manipulated him, that she had planted the idea in his mind. But the evidence was clear, damning. The fingerprints on Carol's poisoned coffee cup were his. The digitalis was traced back to a supplier he had contacted months prior. Allison was also brought in for questioning, and she vehemently denied any direct involvement, insisting that she had merely been a pawn in Peter's twisted game. She portrayed herself as a woman seduced, manipulated, and left to bear the consequences of Peter's obsession. As news of the case spread, Green Hill was plunged into horror. The details of Peter's cold-blooded plan, his betrayal of his own wife, and his cruel manipulation of Allison captivated the nation. The trial was a media spectacle, the story of a love gone rotten, an affair that had driven a man to commit the ultimate betrayal. Peter's defense attempted to paint Allison as the mastermind, but the prosecution presented overwhelming evidence that he alone had orchestrated Carol's death. The jury deliberated for only a few hours before delivering a guilty verdict on charges of first-degree murder. Peter was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, while Allison received a lesser sentence for her role in the affair and was banned from practicing in her field. The town of Green Hill was forever scarred by the tragedy. The Whitman's white picket fence, once a symbol of family harmony, now cast a haunting shadow across the neighborhood. Carol's children were taken in by her sister, their lives irrevocably altered by the loss of their mother. For Green Hill, the tragedy served as a reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind closed doors, hidden from even the most watchful eyes. Whispers of the Whitman case lingered in the quiet streets, each home casting its own shadow in memory of the secrets that had lain buried, unseen, beneath the seemingly perfect surface. And so, Green Hill went on, forever haunted by the chilling truth of the Whitman family's shattered facade.